I've chosen today to read to you a poem by David Bottoms, who was a Georgia Poet Laureate, and I love me some good Southern poetry. So I picked this one because I think that it speaks beautifully about the idea of sacrifice and making sacrifices and the dignity and value in that. When I teach this to my introduction to literature class, I ask them to name, do this for yourselves for just a second. Name, as quickly as you can, famous home run hitters. Who are some famous home run hitters? Babe Ruth. Who? Paul Wood. We can all come, even if you're not a baseball fan, you can recall a famous home run hitter. Can you name anybody who's famous for the bunt? Any good, famous, great bunters out there? Anybody in the Hall of Fame for knocking down a great bunt? Not really, and I think probably most of us, if we could choose to have that ability, we would choose to be home run hitters. And this asks us to think a little bit about the people who bunt and the people who play that role in our lives. So I just want to share this one with you. A sign from my father who stressed the bunt. On the rough diamond, the hand-cut field below the dog lot and barn, we rehearsed the strict technique of bunting. I watched from the infield, the mound, the backstop, as your hand climbed the bat, your legs and shoulders squared toward the pitcher. You could drop it like a seed down either baseline. I admired your style, but not enough to take my eyes off the bank that served as our center field fence. Years passed. 3 leagues of organized ball, no few lives. I could homer into the garden beyond the bank, into the left field lot of Carmichael Motors, but still, you stress the same technique. The crouch and spring, the lead arm absorbing just enough impact, that whole tiresome pitch about basics never changing, and I never learned what you were laying down. Like a hand brushed across the bill of a cap, let this be a sign. I'm getting a grip on sacrifice.
Here we go. Sick by Shel Silverstein. I cannot go to school today, said little Peggy Ann McKay. I have the measles and the mumps, a gash, a rash, and purple bumps. My mouth is wet, my throat is dry. I'm going blind in my right eye. My tonsils are as big as rocks. I've counted 16 chicken pox. And there's one more, that's 17. And don't you think my face looks green? My leg is cut, my eyes are blue. It might be instamatic flu. I cough, and I sneeze. I gasp, and I choke. I'm sure that my left leg is broke. My hip hurts when I've moved my chin. My belly button's caving in. My back is wrenched, my ankle is sprained. My appendix pains each time it rains. My nose is cold, and my toes are numb. I have a sliver in my thumb. My neck is stiff, my voice is weak. I hardly whisper when I speak. My tongue is filling up my mouth. I think my hair is falling out. My elbow's bent, my spine ain't straight. My temperature is 108. My brain is shrunk, I cannot hear. There's a hole inside my ear. I have a hangnail. And my heart is, what? What's that? What's that you say? You say today is Saturday. Goodbye, I'm going out to play.
Hi, my name's Tera Marcum. Ooh, that's loud. This isn't really my favorite poem, but it really is, it's really a good one of Pablo Neruda. It's called Ode to the Artichoke. The tender-hearted artichoke got dressed as a warrior, erect, built a little cupola, stood impermeable under its scales. Around it, the crazy vegetables bristled, grew astonishing tendrils, cattails, bulbs. In the subsoil slept the carrot with its red whiskers. The grapevine dried the runners through which it carries the wine. The cabbage devoted itself to trying on skirts, oregano to perfuming the world. And the gentle artichoke stood there in the garden, dressed as a warrior, burnished like a pomegranate, proud. And one day, along with the others, in large willow baskets, it traveled to the market to realize its dream, the army. Amid the rows, never was it so military as at the fair. Men among the vegetables with their white shirts were marshals of the artichokes, the tight ranks, the voices of command, and the detonation of a falling crate. But then comes Maria with her basket, picks an artichoke, isn't afraid of it, examines it, holds it. She holds it to the light as if it were an egg, buys it, mixes it up in her bag with a pair of shoes, with a head of cabbage and a bottle of vinegar, until entering the kitchen she submerges it into a pot. Thus ends in peace the career of the armored vegetable which is called artichoke. Then, scale by scale, we undress its delight and we eat the peaceful flesh of its green heart. Thank you.
Both of these are by Wendell Berry. I don't know if you're familiar with him. His early writings were more naturalistic writings and speculations on if you look at the land around you and take away everything that humans have built, what the land would have looked like in our absence, and then imagine putting it all back without doing any damage. And how would you go about doing that? This first poem is called Best of Any Song. And it says, best of any song is bird song in the quiet, but first you must have the quiet. All right, this next poem is called Eulogy. This one's a little longer. I've always liked this one because anybody who's ever tried farming will understand it takes more than one lifetime to learn how to farm. And you are completely dependent on the people that came before you and coming around and standing over you and watching you and tuning you through this. And this is a poem about this. Wendell's actually written quite a bit about Owen Flood, who was one of his mentors from the time he was a child. To be at home on its native ground, the mind must go down below its horizon, descend below the light fall on the ridge and steep and valley floor to receive the lives of the dead. It must wake in their sleep, who wake in its dreams. Who is here? On the rock road between creek and woods in the fall of the year, I stood and listened. I heard the cries of little birds high in the wind. And then the beat of old footsteps came around me, and my sight was changed. I passed through the lens of darkness as though a furrow, and the dead gathered to meet me. They knew me, but looked in wonder at the lines in my face, the white hair sprinkled on my head. I saw a tall old man leaning upon a cane, his open hand raised in some fierce commendation, knowledge of long labor in his eyes. Another, a gentler countenance, smiling beneath the brim of a sweaty felt, and welcomed me as before. I saw an old woman, a savor of little things, whose lonely grief was the first I knew, and one bent with age and pain, whose busy hands worked out a selflessness of love. Those were my teachers, and they were more, beloved of face and name, who once bore the substance of our common ground. Their eyes, having grieved all grief, were clear. I saw one standing aside, alone, weariness in his shoulders, his eyes bewildered yet with the newness of his death. In my sorrow, I felt as many times before gladness at the sight of him. Owen, I said. He turned, lifted, tilted his hand. I handed him a clod of earth, picked up in a certain well-known field. He kneaded it in his palm and spoke, "Wendell, this is not a place for you and me." And then he grinned. We recognized his stubbornness. It was his principle to doubt all ease of satisfaction. "The crops are in the barn," I said. "The morning frost has come to the fields, and I have turned back to accept, if I can, what none of us could prevent." He stood, remembering, weighing the cost of the division we had come to. His fingers resting on the earth he cupped lightly in his palm. It seemed to me then that he cast off his own confusion and assumed for one last time and one last kindness the duty of the older man. He nodded his head. The desire I had in early morning and in spring, I never wore it out. I had the desire if I had had the strength. But listen, what we prepared to have, we have. He raised his eyes. "Look," he said. We stood on a height, woods above us, below us on the half-mowed slope. We saw ourselves as we were once, a young man mowing, a boy grubbing with an axe. It was an old abandoned field, long overgrown with thorns and briars. We made it new in the heat haze of that midsummer. He, proud of the ground intelligence clarified, and I, proud in his praise. I wish, I said, that we could be back in that good time again. We are back there again today and always. Where else would we be? He smiled, looked at me, and I knew it was my mind he led me through. He spoke of some infinitude of thought. He led me to another slope beside another woods, thence lighted only by stars. Older now, the man and the boy lay on their backs in deep grass, quietly talking. In the distance moved the outcry of one deep-voiced hound. Other voices joined that voice. Another place, a later time, a hunter's fire among the trees, faces turned to the blaze, laughter, and then silence, while the dark around us lay long breaths of sleep. And then, one by one, he moved me through all the fields of our lives, preparations, plantings, harvest, crews joking at the row's ends, a water jug passing like a kiss. He spoke of our history passing through us, the way our family's generations overlap, the great teaching coming by deed of companionship, characters of fields and times and men, qualities of devotion and work, endless fascinations, passions old as mind, new as light. All our years around us, near us, I saw him furious and narrow, like most men, and saw the virtue that made him unlike most. It was his passion to be true to the condition of the fall, to live by the sweat of his face, to eat his bread, assured that the cost was paid. We came to his time of pain, when the early morning light showed, as always, the sweet world and all an able, well-intentioned band might do by dark. And his strength failed before the light. His body had begun too soon its earthward journey, filling with gravity, and yet his mind kept its old way. Again in the sun of his last harvest, I heard him say, "Do you want to take this row and let me get out of your way?" I saw the world ahead of him then for the first time, and saw it as he already had seen it, himself gone from it. It was a sight I could not see and not weep. He reached and would have touched me with his hand, though he could not. Finally, he brought me to a hill overlooking the fields that once belonged to him, that he once belonged to. "Look," he said. I knew he wanted me to see the years of care the place wore, for his story lay upon it, a bloom, a blessing. The time and place so near, we almost were the men we watched. Summer's end sang in the light. We spoke of death and obligation, the limits of both things and men. Words never moved so heavily between us or cost us more. We hushed, and then that man who bore his death in him and knew it quietly said, "Well, it's a fascinating world after all." His life so powerfully stood there in the presence of his place and work and time. I could not realize except with grief that only his spirit now was with me. In the very hour he died, I told him before I knew his death, the thought of years to come had moved me like a call. I thought of healing, health, friendship, going on, the generations gathering, our good times reaching one best time of all. My mind was overborne with questions I could not speak. It seemed to me we had returned now to the dark valley where our journey began. But a brightening intelligence was on his face. Insight moved him as he was moved by daylight. The best teachers teach more than they know. By their deaths, they teach most. They lead us beyond what we know and what they knew. Thus, my teacher, my old friend, still smiling now before me, wholly moved by what had moved him partly in the world. Again, the host of the dead encircled us as in a dance, and I was aware now of the unborn moving among them. And they turned, and I could see their bodies come to light and fade again in the dark throng. They moved as a distant and hovering song I strained for but could not hear. Our way is endless, my teacher said. The Creator is divided in creation for the joys of recognition. We knew that spirit in each of us once. It brings us here. By its divisions and returns, the world lives. Both mind and earth are made of what its light gives and uses up. So joy contains and survives its cost. The dead abide as grief knows. We are what we have lost. There is a song in creation. It has always been the gift of every gifted voice, though none ever sang it. As he spoke, I heard that song. In its changes and returns, his life was passing into life. That moment, earth and song and mind, the living and the dead were one. At last, completed in his rest, as one who had worked and bathed, fed and loved and slept, he let fall the beloved earth that I had brought him. He raised his hand, turned me to my way, and I, inheritor of what I mourned, went back toward the light of day.
I want to read a poem. The author is my wife, Linda Moore. This was the first poem that she published, and as far as I know, this may be the first public reading of this poem. It's entitled Such Love. Such love, such tenderness and warmth that illuminates every day and secures us like warm blankets at evening. Was it on that first meeting, that first coming together of two powerful forces that gave commencement to such love? Was it conceived on a beach, somewhere perhaps in the country? Could it have been over a cup of coffee or a glass of beer? Such love. Penetrating our being like a hot summer sun, sprinkling our hearts like cool rain, sheltering us like the golden leaves of autumn, chilling our bodies like fresh winter snow, making us what we are and leading us to wherever we'll go, like the morning glory that opens her heart to a new day. Such love, our morning and evening together for eternity.
I'm Connie Heflin. I have two song lyrics, so I'm veering from the traditional poetry to songs. And I am dating myself with the selections because my first one would be a song lyric by Helen Reddy, who those of you my age will recognize from the mid-70s. Remember, she wrote, the most popular song was I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. But she also wrote other tunes, and this one is My Best Friend. And you may not remember this one, but you can Google it and hear an acoustic version that is very, very pretty. Let me read this one because it is special to me because it's about self-esteem. Would you take better care of yourself? Would you be kinder to yourself? Would you be more forgiving of your human imperfections if you realized your best friend was yourself? Who is always with you everywhere? Who is on your side when others aren't there? And tell me, who will never let you down in any situation? Who will see that you always get your share? And that's why I am a best friend to myself. And I take me out whenever I feel low. And I make my life as happy as a best friend would. I'm as nice to me as anyone I know. Okay, that's the first one. And then the second selection is by the great, none other than Paul McCartney, because he is just one of the best in the world. And Larry and I got to see him in Las Vegas, and it was just like being, magic. I was in the room with Paul McCartney, even though I was way up in the nosebleed section and he was way down. You could just feel the magic. But in an interview, he said that one time he met a man that, he just conversed with briefly, and at the end of that meeting, upon leaving, the man said, "I wish you a good death." And he thought that was a very odd thing to say to somebody, "I wish you a good death." But he got to thinking about it, and at this point in his life, he thought, well, that's kind of maybe a nice thing to say to somebody. "I wish you a good death," because this was someone he probably would not see again. And so in thinking about that, he thought, well, I believe I'll write a song about that. And this song is called "The End of the End," and it is on his last album, Memories Almost Full. I'll have to put my glasses on for this one. And it's supposed to be upbeat. The end of the end. At the end of the end, it's the start of a journey to a much better place. And this wasn't bad, so a much better place would have to be special. No need to be sad. On the day that I die, I'd like jokes to be told and stories of old to be rolled out like carpets that children have played on and laid on while listening to stories of old. At the end of the end, it's the start of a journey to a much better place, and a much better place would have to be special. No reason to cry. On the day that I die, I'd like bells to be rung and songs that were sung to be hung out like blankets that lovers have played on and laid on while listening to songs that were sung. At the end of the end, it's the start of a journey to a much better place, and a much better place would have to be special. No reason to cry, no need to be sad at the end of the end. Thank you for this opportunity.
I have a couple of different poems to read today. The first one was shared by a friend of mine. He used to teach for us part-time, and he was a big library supporter, and it's appropriately called "In the Reading Room." Alone in the library room, even when others are there in the room, alone except for themselves, there is the illusion of peace. The air in the room is stilled. There are reading lights on the tables, looking as if they're reading, looking as if they're studying the text and understanding, shedding light on what the words are saying, but under their steady, imbecile gaze, the page is blank, waiting patiently not to be blank. The page is blank until the mind that reads crosses the black river, seeking the queen of the underworld, Persephone, where she sits by the side of the one who brought her there from Ina, Hades, the mute, the deaf, king of the dead letter. She is clothed in the beautiful garment of our thousand misunderstandings of the sacred text. That's the first one. There's a little bit of a story with the other poem that I'm getting ready to read. Our oldest daughter is a senior in high school, and apparently it's customary for parents or grandparents or other close relatives to purchase an ad in the yearbook about the student for the high school annual. I did not know this. And so I went and looked back at prior yearbooks to kind of get a feel for what to include. And I liked what I saw, but a lot of it was just kind of, "Oh, Johnny, we're so proud of you, and, we just can't believe you're this old now." And I thought, well, I just want to find a really cool poem to include in the yearbook. So I started looking for some poems, and ultimately I did not include this one. This is Morning Song by Sylvia Plath, but this poem has meaning to me because it reminds me of that time almost 18 years ago when I was a new mother with a brand new baby. So this is Morning Song. Love sets you going like a fat gold watch. The midwife slapped your foot soles, and your bald cry took its place among the elements. Our voices echo, magnifying your arrival, new statue. In a drafty museum, your nakedness shadows our safety. We stand round blankly as walls. I'm no more your mother than the cloud that distills a mirror to reflect its own slow effacement at the wind's hand. All night, your moth breath flickers among the flat pink roses. I wake to listen. A far sea moves in my ear. One cry, and I stumble from bed, cow-heavy and floral in my Victorian nightgown. Your mouth opens clean as a cat's. The window square whitens and swallows its dull stars. And now you try your handful of notes. The clear vowels rise like balloons. If you will indulge me one more, I'm kind of cheating here, but this is another poem along the same vein about a parent who looks forward to sharing important things with their child. This is called A Newborn Girl at Passover by Nan Cohen. And in this particular poem, if you hear the word apricots, think books or love of reading. And you'll probably see why I selected this particular poem. So remember, if you hear apricots, think books. Consider one apricot in a basket of them. It is very much like all the other apricots, an individual already, skin and seed. Now think of this day, one you will probably forget. The next breath you take, a long drink of air, holiday or not, it doesn't matter. A child is born and doesn't know what day it is. The particular joy in my heart she cannot imagine. The taste of apricots is in store for her. Thanks.
The first one is called Lineage by Margaret Walker. My grandmothers were strong. They followed plows and bent to toil. They moved through fields sowing seed. They touched earth and grain grew. They were full of sturdiness and singing. My grandmothers were strong. My grandmothers are full of memories, smelling of soap and onions and wet clay, with veins rolling roughly over quick hands. They have many clean words to say. My grandmothers were strong. Why am I not as they? Thank you. One thing that I'll say about that poem that I just read is that I also associate with not just the connection, but the disconnection that is frustrating. I think for me as a Southerner that I have this yearning for the land, but I have such a disconnection too. So this next one also speaks to that idea as well. And it's by Fred Chappell, and it's called My Grandmother Washes Her Feet. I see her still, unsteadily riding the edge of the clawfoot tub, mumbling to her feet, musing blood rust water about her ankles, cotton skirt pulled up, displaying bony, bruised, patchy calves that would make you weep. Rinds of her soles had darkened, crust-colored, not yellow now, like the tough outer belly of an adder. In 14 hours, the most refreshment she'd given herself was dabbling her feet in the water. You mightn't have liked John Giles. Everybody knew he was a mean one, galloping whiskey and bad women all night. Tried to testify dead drunk in church one time. That was a ruckus. Later came back a war hero, and all the young men took to doing the things he did and failed. Finally, one of his women's men shot him. What for? Stealing milk through fences. That part of family nobody wants to speak of. They'd rather talk about fine men, brick houses, money. Maybe you ought to know. Teach you something. What do they talk about? Generals, and the damn Civil War, and marriages, things you brag about in front of Bibles. You'd think there was arms and legs of family on every battlefield from Chickamauga to Atlanta. That's not the way it was. Don't matter how it is, and the proper way to talk is all. It was nothing they ever did, and plenty they won't talk about, like John Giles. Her cracked toes thumped the tub wall, spreading chocolates. Amber toenails curved like shavings. She twisted the worn knob to pour in coolness. I felt suffuse her body like a whiskey. Bubba Martin, he was another, and no kind of man. Jack-leg preacher with the brains of a toad. Read the Bible upside down and crazy, till it drove him crazy. Making crazy marks on door sills, windows, sides of Luther's barn. He killed himself last with a shotgun. No gratitude for Luther putting up with him all those years. Shot so he'd fall down the well? I never heard. I ain't never mentioned him. Nor Aunt Annie that everybody called Paregoric Annie, that roamed the highways thumbing cars and begging change to keep even with her craving. She claimed she was saving up to buy a glass eye. Finally shamed them enough, they went together and got her one. That didn't stop her. She lugged it around in a velvet-lined case, asking strangers please to drop it in the socket for her. They had her put away, and that was that. There's places family ties just won't stretch to. Born then, in my mind, a race of beings, unknown and monstrous. I named them shadow cousins, a linked, long, dark line of them peering from mirrors and gleaming in closets agog to manifest themselves inside myself. Like discovering a father's cancer, I wanted to search my body for telltale streaks. Sounds like a bunch of cow thieves. Those too, I reckon. But they're forgotten or covered over so well, not even I can make them out. It's foggy when folks decide they're coming on respectable. First thing you know, you'll have a family tree. I imagined a wind-stunted horse apple. She raised her face. The moons of the naked bulb flared in her spectacles, painting out her eyes. In dirty water, light bobbed like round soap. A countenance, matter of fact, age engraved, mulling in peaceful wonder petty annals of embarrassment. Gray, but edged with brown like an old photograph, her hair shone yellow. A tiredness mantled her fine energy. She shifted, sluicing water under her instep. "Oh, what's the use?" she said. "Water seeks its level. If your daddy thinks that teaching school in a white shirt makes him a likelier man, what's to blame? Leastways, he won't smother a mule farts or have to starve for a pinch of rainfall. Nothing new gets started without the old's plowed under, or halfway under. We sprouted from dirt, though, and it's with you, and dirt you'll never forget. No, ma'am. Don't you say me no, ma'am, yet. Wait till you get your chance to deny it." Once she giggled, a sound like stroking muslin. "You're bookish. I can see you easy, a lawyer or a county clerk in a big white suit and tie, feeding the preacher and bribing the sheriff and the judge. Second generation respectable don't come to any better destiny. But it's dirt you rose from, dirt you'll bury in. Just about the time you'll think your blood is clean, here'll come dirt in a natural shape you never dreamed. It'll rise up saying, 'Fred, where's that mule you're supposed to march behind? Where's your overalls and roll-your-owns? Where's your blue tick hounds and dominickers?' Not all the money in the world can wash true poor, true rich. fatback just won't change to artichokes. What's artichokes? Pray Jesus, you'll never know. For if you do, it'll be a sign you've grown away from what you are, can fly to flinders like a touch-me-not. I may have erred when I said true poor. It ain't the same as dirt poor. When you got true dirt, you got everything you need. And don't you say me yes ma'am again. You just wait. She leaned and pulled the plug. The water circled, gagging to a bloody eye, and poured in the hole like a rat. I thought maybe their spirits had gathered there, all my shadow cousins, clouding the water, and now they ran to earth and would cloud the earth. Effigies of soil, I could seek them out by clasping soil, forcing warm, rude fingers into ancestral jelly my father wouldn't plow. I strained to follow them and never did. I never had the grit to stir those guts. I never had the guts to stir that earth. Thank you.
I chose what I'll call a poem from a pretty old book by the poem named Paul, formerly known as Saul. And this poem you may recognize in the context of weddings. It's fairly common to be read, at least part of it, in weddings. But I think like any good piece of writing, it speaks to us where we are and in the context of our lives as we're living them now. So I ask, as you're listening to these words, you'll think about them in the context where you are now and see if it might speak to you as well. This is chapter 13 of the book of 1 Corinthians out of the New Testament, commonly known as the love chapter. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am only a resounding gong or clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part, but when perfection comes, the imperfect disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Now we see but a poor reflection, as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Thank you.
I'm Angel Rhodes, and I chose to read a poem today by Edgar Allan Poe. And a lot of people, when they think about Edgar Allan Poe, they think about, I had someone tell me this morning, it's dark and morbid and kind of creepy, and everybody really kind of thinks about that. But I chose to read Annabel Lee because it speaks about something that's a little bit different and universal: love. Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. It was many and many year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that, long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kingsman came and bore her away from me to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea.
Good afternoon. I'm Latasha Williamson, and I will be reading a piece by Maya Angelou, Still I Rise. And one of the reasons why I chose this piece is because she has such a magnificent way of capturing the essence and the femininity and the power and the beauty of a woman, but not just any woman, a black woman, and that's me. Still I Rise, Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard? 'Cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ken Bradshaw. I work here in the library. I guess I misunderstood. I thought there was going to be a prize for the shortest poem, but I think David already took that prize. So, this is a poem called "I Don't Suppose You've Seen" by Ruth Harrigan. I haven't been acquainted with it very long, but when I found out this was going to be this event, and not too long ago we had a focus on Special Needs Month, so I'm always wanting to look for connections between things, so I looked for something that was a poem about special needs. I think this one's just right because it talks about how sometimes we fail to see what's not the obvious thing to see about each other. I don't suppose you've seen my friend. He has black hair, blue eyes, and wears a Yankees cap. No? He probably went too fast, by too fast in his wheelchair. What's that? Did you say, that guy? That guy in the wheelchair? Yeah, that's him. You saw his wheelchair. Did you see him? Thank you.
I'm Tena Payne, and I'm going to read a poem to you from Kahil Gibran. How many people have ever heard of him? Old people, yes, old people. Kind of old people. But actually, first heard about this in the 60s. It really came out and was very popular during that time, and I think it was specifically because this is called The Prophet. It was originally written in 1923, and then it came back in the 60s, and I think it was a period of confusion, a time when people were looking for answers for things, because he actually just philosophizes on his ideas and feelings about love, marriage, children, giving, you know, all of those concepts. And so I think people kind of were attached to that back then, and you know, were really, really looking at those philosophies for answers. It came back to me later as a nurse. The particular section that I've always liked has to do with death, because as a nurse you do have to face your feelings about death, because you do sit with patients when they're dying, you talk with their families, you know, you hold babies while they die. And so, you know, you take home with you a lot of feelings and have to really learn to accept death. And really what this part of his poem, it's his philosophy on what does death mean. It really to me says that death is just a continuation of life. What you do in life, you will do also in death. If you have a good life, you have a good death and a good hereafter. And, you know, maybe if you don't, you probably won't have a, you know, good hereafter if you're not good. But it kind of just really gives us an idea that death really isn't something to be feared. It's a continuation of the process and all of the things that we have done in life. And here's what it says. You would know the secret of death, but how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? The owl whose night-bound eyes are blind unto the day cannot unveil the mystery of light. If you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide unto the body of life, for life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. In the depths of your hopes and desires lies your silent knowledge of the beyond, and like seeds dreaming beneath the snow, your heart dreams of spring. Trust the dreams, for in them is hidden the gate to eternity. Your fear of death is but the trembling of the shepherd when he stands before the king, whose hand is to be laid upon him in honor. Is the shepherd not joyful beneath his trembling, and he shall wear the mark of the king? Yet is he not more mindful of his trembling? For what is in it to die, but to stand naked in the wind and melt into the sun? And what is in it to cease breathing, but to free the breath from the restless tides, that may it rise and expand and seek God unencumbered? Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing. And when you have reached the mountaintop, then you shall begin to climb. And when the earth shall claim your limbs, then shall you truly dance. So there.
Good afternoon. My name is Sassy Wallen, and I'd like to dedicate this poem today to my father-in-law. Mr. Frank Wallen was 19 years old when he went into the military. He joined the ranks of many boys his age going overseas to fight in World War II. After his stint in World War II, he fought in Korea, and then he did 2 tours in Vietnam. At last count, we're losing our World War II veterans at over 1,100 a day. Veterans of Korea and Vietnam, we lose close to 1,500 a day. Pretty soon, all these average shows will be gone, and there will be no one left to tell their stories but the historians and the books. My father-in-law fathered 7 children. He buried his oldest daughter when she was 19. He loved only one woman till his death. And when he passed, there wasn't any ticket tape parades, no flags flew at half-mast. There was just a simple ceremony in a small country church with a gathering of his family and his friends to mark the passing of a great man. So it is with him in mind that I offer this poem today. It's by Lawrence Vancourt, and it's called A Soldier Died Today. He was getting old and paunchy, and his hair was falling fast. And he sat around the Legion telling stories of the past, of a war that he had fought in, the deeds that he had done, and his exploits with his buddies. They were heroes, every one. And though sometimes to his neighbors, his tales, they were a joke, all his Legion buddies listened, for they knew whereof he spoke. But we'll hear his tales no longer, for old Bill has passed away, and the world's a little poorer, for a soldier died today. He will not be mourned by many, just his children and his wife, for he lived an ordinary, quiet, uneventful life. Held a job, raised a family, quietly going on his way, and the world won't note his passing, though a soldier died today. When politicians leave this earth, their bodies lie in state, while thousands note their passing and proclaim that they were great. Papers tell their whole life stories from the time that they were young, but the passing of a soldier goes silently unsung. Is the greatest contribution to the welfare of our land a guy who breaks his promises and cons his fellow man? Or the ordinary fellow who in times of war and strife goes off to serve his country and offers up his life? A politician's stipend and the style in which he lives are sometimes disappropriate to the service that he gives, while the ordinary soldier who offered up his all is paid off with a medal and a pension, mostly small. It's so easy to forget them, for it was all so long ago that the old bills of our country went to battle, but we know it was not the politicians with their compromised employees who won for us the freedom that our country now enjoys. Should you find yourself in danger with your enemies at hand, would you want a politician with his ever-shifting hand? Or would you prefer a soldier who is sworn to defend his home, his kin, and country, who would fight for you till the end? He was just a common soldier, and his ranks are growing thin, but his presence should remind us we may need his kind again. For when countries are in conflict, that we find the soldier's part is to clean up all the troubles that the politicians start. If we cannot do him honor while he's here to hear the praise, then at least let's give him homage at the ending of his days. Perhaps just a simple headline in a paper that would say, "Our country is in mourning, for a soldier died today."
Most people meet E.E. Cummings when they're in high school, and I guess you'd think most of us would outgrow him. I never did. Checking the shape of the book, I hope it'll last for the reading, and the price, $1.75. I think you can tell how old the book is. And when I first met E.E. Cummings, one very, very short poem, I'm cheating too, I memorized it the moment that I heard it. It's not the one I'm going to read. When God decided to invent the world, he took one breath, bigger than a circus tent, and everything began. When man decided to destroy the world, he took the was of shall, and finding only why, smashed it in two, because, which I think of today. But when it's not my favorite poem, that didn't even enter my mind, the one I'm going to read. Sociologist or psychologist or maybe English teachers Paul can tell us how many seconds go by before a man thinks of sex. A man thinks of sex every how many minutes? Interpersonal communications teacher, come on. Okay. And for some reason, when Kim said something about poems, I thought about this one of Cummings. And, you know, you can find lewd and crude and vulgar easily, and sometimes that's what you want, that's what you need. But I thought of something that was just so nicely naughty, naughty that your grandmother, Constance, could enjoy. My sweet, old, etc., Aunt Lucy during the recent war could, and what is more did, tell you just what everybody was fighting for. My sister Isabel created hundreds and hundreds of socks, not to mention shirts, flea-proof ear warmers, etc., wristers, etc. My mother hoped that I would die, etc., bravely, of course. My father used to become hoarse talking about how it was a privilege, and if only he could. Meanwhile, myself, etc., lay quietly in the deep mud, etc., dreaming, etc., of your smile, eyes, knees, and of your etc.
The poem I chose is by Frank X. Walker. Some of you got to see him here. I did not. I was really having a great time in Lexington at a curriculum meeting. But I did get over to Joseph Beth Booksellers, and I picked up a Frank X. Walker book of poetry, and I've been a fan ever since, mostly because he captures confessional quality, I think, and like those of you who raised your hands, I have a lot of poetry. My wife's promised she won't do anything with it until after I've gone, and then nothing will happen anyway. This is my poem's been running they mouths again. You got to be careful what you say around children, because they are guaranteed to repeat it when company comes. My poems are like that. Speak your mind, pour out your heart on a page within earshot of black alphabet words, and they will run and tell somebody. Let the ink and paper verses you carried for 9 months, or the rhymes born prematurely, hear what you covet, who you despise, where you buried the body, and they will betray you for sure. I have learned I cannot trust my poems. Everybody knows more about me and my family now than I would ever tell a soul. My mother asked me to stop telling family secrets. Ain't nobody's business but ours what goes on in this house. I tried to tell her it was not me, that the poem's been running they mouths again. And maybe she should keep them for a while, try and talk some sense into their heads. So she took them home one day, gathered in a room like grandchildren, sat them in her lap, turned their pages one by one. When I returned, she met me at the door, fear in her voice, anger in her eyes. You got to change them, she said. Why do you let them say such bad things about people you say you love? Change the titles. Take out that part about him being from Kentucky and people calling him names. If my sister reads these poems, it will break her heart. I knew right then that they had gone and done it, maybe even crossed the line, disrespecting my mama like that. And I promised to beat their ass as soon as I got them home. I knew it would hurt me more than it would hurt them. But Mama said, nah, just talk with them. Ask them to compromise, to use some discretion about what they tell to who, because you never know who's listening or who's waiting to use your own words against you.